country and for our people that I do. I could not believe in his message more. But he can't do it alone. It's us and not him, and it's we and not me. So with all that, it's enough about me. It's my extreme honor and privilege to introduce to you a champion for all of us, the next President of the United States, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Now it works. We have a technological genius over here. Turn it on. All right, thank you all for coming out. What a beautiful turnout. What a beautiful evening. And let me thank Michaela for her remarks and Stanley for his remarks. Where's Stanley? Stanley is? Stanley? Oh, thank you very much for your remarks. Just came back from Iowa. You've heard of Iowa? Usually mentioned in the same breath as New Hampshire. For some reason, two uniquely important states. We don't know why. But we had a great time in Iowa. And I want to pick up on what Stanley said, and why the message of our campaign is us, not me. And that is for two reasons. One, philosophically, what we believe is in a nation not in which people like Trump step on other people in order to make billions of dollars and then come to Washington and want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and get tax breaks for the very rich. That's one philosophy. But our philosophy is that, in a sense, we are all in this together, that the pain of your family has got to concern my family, and my family's needs has got to be of interest and importance to you. That's what human life is about, that we are in it together in a difficult world, and we work together. But the second reason that we talk about us, not me, is something that you're not going to hear discussed on TV. You're not going to read about it in the newspapers. Just something we're not pretty much allowed to discuss. And that speaks to who has real power in America. Who has real power in America? And how do we, I'll get to you in a minute, all right. And we'll discuss that issue. But the point that I make when we talk about us, not me, is that the only way we bring about transformation of our country is when millions of people come together and stand up and fight back, okay? And the reason that I can come here and give you a speech and say, and I will tell you all the things that I hope to accomplish, and you'll say, that's good, that's good. But the truth of the matter is that nobody, not Bernie Sanders, not any other candidate, no matter how honest and well-intentioned that candidate may be, that candidate cannot do it alone. That president cannot do it alone, because we are taking on incredible wealth and incredible power, and people who will fight tenaciously with every tool that they have in order to preserve their profits, their wealth, and their power. So what we are engaged in this campaign, I think, are two or three fundamental principles. Number one, it goes without saying that we have got to come together to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country. And it never ends. I mean, every time you think there's some outrage coming from the White House, before you're able to get that, your concern out, there's another outrage. You can't keep up with it. I mean, I gather he now believes that Hillary Clinton went into Jeffrey Epstein's cell and hung him. It's the new insight from the president or something like that. It's hard to keep up with the lunacy that takes place. But this is what we do know, and I say this very sincerely. Obviously, as a senator from Vermont and as a presidential candidate, But above and beyond that, as an American citizen, somebody who loves this country, it never occurred to me that in my lifetime we would have a president who is an overt racist, sexist, xenophobe, religious bigot. Never occurred to me that we would have a president who was all of that. And that even worse, we would have a president who is not running for re-election on his ideas, because he has no ideas, but is simply running by dividing people up based on the color of their skin or where they were born or their sexual orientation or whatever it may be. And to be very honest with you, I never really expected that in my lifetime we would have a president like that. So the antidote to what Trump is trying to do, which is to divide us up, is what our campaign is about. And that is bringing people together around an agenda that works for all, not just the 1%. All right, that's what and that is black, the African American community, and white and Latino, Asian American, Native American. It is gay and straight. It is immigrant people born in the United States. And we have got to come together like we have never done before. I want to talk a little bit about what power is about. And again, this is not something you're going to see in the corporate media. It's not. Stanley talked about Medicare for all. So let me talk a little bit about why I support Medicare for all and the progress that we're making and the obstacles that are in our way. Let's take a moment. Talk about the current healthcare system that you're living in. First of all, let me ask you this question. Is the current healthcare system cost effective? Anyone know? No. We are spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other industrialized nation. You got that? So we are spending a fortune. You know, you can argue that if you don't have, if you have a car that's breaking down and you pay $200 for the car, you can't complain, right? But if you paid $50,000 and it wasn't working, you can complain. So we are spending twice as much per person, almost $11,000 for everybody here. $28,000 it costs us for a family of 4. So we spend a huge amount of money. And what are we getting for it? This is what you're getting for it. You're getting 87 million Americans who are either uninsured, no insurance at all, or underinsured. And one of the pathetic nature of the discussion we have on healthcare is people talk about somebody is insured. Yeah, well, you may have insurance, but if you have a $5,000 deductible, it doesn't mean much because you can't afford to go to the doctor. So you got 87 million Americans, either no health insurance or they are underinsured, which means they are reluctant to go to a doctor when they need to go to that doctor. Now, we don't talk about this also. Every year, 30,000 people in our country die. Next time you're in the doctor's office, ask the doctor, has he seen, she's seen, patients walking in when it was too late? And I've talked to doctors who say to their patients, why didn't you come in when you first got your symptoms? And the person would say, well, I didn't have any insurance. I couldn't afford the out-of-pocket expenses, had a deductible. 30,000 people in this country die every single year because they don't get to a doctor when they should. And here's something we also don't talk about. 500,000 people in America go bankrupt because they cannot afford the outrageous medical bills that they incur if they end up in the hospital or with a serious illness. Can you imagine? Think about it. Take a step back. You go bankrupt. Your whole finances of your family is destroyed. For what crime? Did you go out and buy a fancy house? Did you blow your life savings at a casino in Las Vegas? You go bankrupt because you had cancer or a heart disease. Is that a reason why a family, many of them have worked their entire lives, should go bankrupt? And the answer is obviously no. In this country, we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. 2 weeks ago, I took a trip to Canada, to Windsor, Ontario. And you know about that trip. And I went with a group of folks, mostly from the Midwest, who are dealing with a very serious and growing crisis in this country, and that is diabetes. Went across the Canadian border, 15 minutes away from Detroit. I talked to these folks on the bus, and I learned so much. But the bottom line is, we got 7.5 million people in this country who use insulin. Okay, there are diabetics who use insulin. It's a growing problem. What I learned, which is unbelievable, is that 1/4 of those people are rationing the insulin they need. You can't ration insulin if you have diabetes. And on this trip, there was a young man and his mother, beautiful people. And the young man, I think maybe from Indiana, I may be wrong on this, was a football player in college. Big guy. And he had diabetes, and he knew how much insulin was costing his family that did not have a lot of money. And he lied to his parents and told them that he had the insulin that he needed. Meanwhile, he was rationing it, and he was getting sicker and sicker. It's a football player, big kid. Until finally he became too ill, and his parents learned about it, and they literally had to forego paying their electric bill so they could buy the insulin that he needed. Okay? We went to Ontario, we went to Windsor, Ontario. We purchased insulin, the same vials, the same exact product, made by the same exact company for 1/10 of the price. Can you imagine? 10%. And that particular family, I think, saved $10,000. I don't remember, I think they got enough insulin for 6 months. 1/10 of the price. So you got a healthcare system in which 87 million people, uninsured or underinsured. You got a healthcare system where 30,000 people a year die unnecessarily. A healthcare system where 500,000 people go bankrupt. A healthcare system where working class people are spending an incredible percentage of their income for healthcare. That's the system that we have right now. But the other side of the story, and why we have not changed this healthcare system, has nothing to do with the debate about the merits. It is impossible for anybody to defend a system like that. But the reason we have not made the change has everything to do with politics and greed and power. We are taking on an industry last year which made $100 billion in profits. The top 10 drug companies made $69 billion in profit. In terms of insulin, you got 3 companies producing about 90% of the insulin in this country, engaging in what seems to be pretty clearly price fixing. A corrupt industry charging people outrageous prices, made $69 billion in profits last year. Healthcare industry made at least, the insurance companies made at least $23 billion in profit. Want to hear how your healthcare dollars are spent? A year or 2 ago, Aetna, major health insurance company, merged with CVS. The guy who engineered the merger, the guy named Mr. Bertolini, was the head of Aetna. He ended up with a $500 million golden parachute. So you got 87 million people can't afford health care, and a guy at the head of a large insurance company ends up with a $500 million golden parachute. In the last 20 years, the healthcare industry has spent billions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions. Just go to the internet, look it up. Vast majority of the politicians get their checks from the insurance companies or this group or that group in healthcare. And that is why we are stuck with a system in which our people can't afford healthcare, but the industry makes $100 billion a year in profit. And mark my words, You have seen, and here's the irony, there was a CNN debate a couple of weeks ago that I was in. And I mentioned during the debate that you would see on a debate among Democratic presidential candidates where Medicare for All was one of the issues being debated. And right in the middle of that debate was an ad coming from the healthcare industry telling you how terrible Medicare for All is. All right? And you're going to see more and more of them. You'll see them here in New Hampshire. We'll see them all over this country. And they'll be attacking me, trying to do this and trying to do that, trying to take away private insurance from people. Well, my experience is people often love their doctors. Very often they have good experience at a hospital and they appreciate the staff at the hospital. Nobody I know loves their private insurance company. And then they say you're going to take away that private insurance. Well, guess what? Every single year, 50 million Americans change their insurance policies. Every time you lose your job, you're likely ending up in a new insurance program. You quit your job. Your employer calls you in and they say, you know what, Joe? We're changing insurance carriers. We've got a better deal over here. I did that when I was mayor of Burlington. You look around getting the best deal that you can. You're changing your private insurance carrier. Now, what does Medicare for All mean? So let's simplify it here so that we understand how we can respond to the attacks that will come from an industry which, mark my words, will spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Remember, if they spend $1 billion attacking Medicare for All, that is 1% of the profits that they made last year. Got it? And that's a good investment if they can defeat Medicare for All. So what does Medicare for All mean? It means that we start right now with a good program called Medicare, which is the most popular health insurance program in the country. And what we do is we expand Medicare, because Medicare is good, but anybody here who's on Medicare knows it doesn't cover dental care, doesn't cover hearing aids, doesn't cover eyeglasses, and those are real needs for seniors. So our Medicare for All program expands Medicare to cover all of those benefits. And then what we do in the first year, this is how radical it is. We go from 65 years of age, which is the eligibility level now for Medicare. You got to be 65 to get in. First year, we're going down to 55. And let me tell you, there are millions of people now who are 60 years of age who are desperately hoping and praying they're going to be alive to when they're 65 so they can get into Medicare, all right? So we lower it first year to 55, and we cover all the children, and we expand benefits. Next year, 45, next year, 35, then we cover everybody. That's it. That is a hell of a lot less complicated than all the other plans that you have. And what I want to tell you is, despite the incredible opposition and the amounts of money we're going to see from the insurance companies, the drug companies, and all those guys, virtually every single poll that has come out recently talks about more and more support for Medicare for All. The American people understand that the current system is wasteful, dysfunctional, not serving working families. They want to change. So this is a battle that will be a battle. It's not a debate over ideas. They cannot defend the system. It is a question of whether or not we are capable of taking on an industry which over the last 20 years has spent billions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions. So my question for you, will you stand with me in taking on the healthcare industry and fighting for Medicare for all? We can win this, and we're winning it every day. But the opposition will be savage, because there's a lot at stake for these guys. $100 billion a year is nothing to sneeze at. All right, that's issue number one. And the point, again, I'm making here is this is not just that our idea is right. The only way we defeat the insurance and the drug insurance companies and the drug companies is when millions of people stand together. All right? And I want to talk about some of the progress that we have made in recent years because people have stood together. When I came here to New Hampshire 4 years ago, and I talked about the very radical idea, or so it was portrayed, the radical idea that if somebody in America works 40 or 50 hours a week, they should not live in poverty, that we should raise that minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. Well, what happened is, over that time, you had people in the fast food industry, workers, often people of color, who went out on strike. A group called Fight for 15, part of the SEIU union. And they went out and they told the country, you can't make it on $10 an hour or $11 an hour. You can't raise a family on those wages. And the American people listened. And the result of all of that is that in 4 years, what seemed like a radical idea just a few years ago, today, $15 an hour minimum wage has been passed in 7 states and by the United States House of Representatives. So my point here is that an idea which seems radical today will not be radical tomorrow after it is passed. That's the way it works. 100 years ago, it seemed like a radical idea for women to have the vote. All right? But women stood up and fought back and demanded that they not be second-class citizens. 100 years ago, we had racism of the worst kind, segregation, lynching, taking place throughout this country. But the African American community and their white allies stood together and fought back against racism and segregation. And in the 60s, we passed the Voting Rights Act, and we passed the Civil Rights Act. And it's the same story for the labor movement. And it's the same story for the gay movement. Change never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. And that's what this campaign is about. So I could give you a million ideas here, and you nod your head. But I got to be honest with you. And to say that if I'm elected, we got to take on the healthcare industry. You got to take on the pharmaceutical industry. And I'll give you another example, which we're wrestling with right now. And I want you to think about it. Because what our campaign is about largely is asking, why not? Why not? Why can't we do A, B, and C when we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world? And I want you to think about this for a second. The scientists, not only in the United States, but all over the world, are in virtual unanimous agreement that climate change is real, that climate change is already doing devastating harm to our country and to countries all over the world. You're following all that. The heat wave in Europe, unprecedented temperature rise, July, warmest month in history, extreme weather disturbances, floods, droughts, the whole thing. Okay? And what the scientific community tells us, they said, hey, we made a mistake. We underestimated the speed in which climate change is transforming the planet. We were wrong. It's worse than we thought. And they told us last year that we have all of 12 years, which is no time at all from an historical perspective, 12 years, in order to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. 12 years to make sure that the little children here grow up in a planet that is healthy and happy. Now I want you to think about something. Think about an industry, the fossil fuel industry, which makes tens of billions of dollars in profit. An industry which receives huge, let me underline, huge subsidies and tax breaks from the federal government. And what is this industry doing? What is their product doing? Oh, nothing much other than destroying the planet. That's it. So you got an industry out there that is destroying the planet. And you know what? We cannot allow that to continue. And together we're going to figure out ways to stop it. And when we move to energy efficiency, we make all of our older buildings more energy efficient. I've been in homes all over Vermont, buildings all over Vermont, where we invested in energy efficiency, and the amount of energy used declined by 50%. People save money on their heating bills. And in states like Arizona, they'll save money on their cooling bills. So we have got to do that, and when we do that, we invest in wind and solar and geothermal and other sustainable energies, we create millions of good-paying jobs. But the point that I want to make to you, and nobody else is going to make this point to you, I want you to think this through and think outside of the box. You got drug companies executives who sit in a boardroom and they say, all right, we're going to raise prices. Oh, it's too bad that 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. And some of them will die and others will suffer. Too bad. But what's most important for us in the industry is to make tens of billions of dollars in profit. We have to deal with that criminal activity. Call it what it is. And you got to say to the drug company, sorry, you cannot force elderly folks in New Hampshire and Vermont to cut their pills in half because they cannot afford the medicine they need. But you got to call it what it is. And it's even worse with the fossil fuel industry. What do we call people who are destroying the planet? You see, what media doesn't do, they say, well, you know, we got a climate change problem. And they get us to think in a way that is much too conservative. Yeah, climate change is a problem, we got to deal with it. You got to deal with the reality that people knowingly, for short-term profits, are destroying the planet. It reminds me very much, and maybe I'm the oldest person here, I don't know. But some people who have gray hair will remember. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, there were ads on television with doctors smoking cigarettes. Remember that? Ah, cool, good for your lungs, literally, okay? And yet the tobacco industry knew that they were producing a product that killed millions, including my own father. Okay, they knew it. And if you think the fossil fuel industry doesn't have the engineers and the scientists know exactly what they're doing, you'd be dead wrong. This is what we are dealing with. We're not arguing about climate change. I mean, it is how we go forward is a good debate. We've got to figure this one out. How we move aggressively and how we, by the way, protect the workers through a just transition. Coal miners are not my enemy. There's nobody in Congress who has a stronger pro-worker voting record than Bernie Sanders does. And the oil rig workers are not our enemy. But our enemy is an industry which is destroying this planet. We will protect the workers as we move to new technology, sustainable technology. But that's what I want you to be thinking about. It's not a question of, is climate change real or not? Everybody except Donald Trump understands that it is. All right? So the question is, how do you take on an industry? That is the question. Okay? Now you got other issues. When you talk about a corporate elite making the decisions in this country, let's talk about the terrible, unspeakable tragedies that we have witnessed in the last week or two. And it's difficult, frankly, to talk about. Deranged people who walk into a Walmart or walk into a nightclub area and take out an assault weapon and start shooting down people, or even worse, not even worse. I mean, again, unspeakable, going into schools. It's hard even to imagine. And yet, what we know as a nation, in poll after poll, is the American people, why there are differences in terms of gun safety ideas, there are differences. But overwhelmingly, the American people, gun owners in states like New Hampshire and Vermont, gun owners, non-gun owners, support strongly common sense gun safety legislation. All right, so what does that mean? So what that means is obviously you expand background checks to make sure that people who should not be owning guns do not own guns. It's not very radical. I think about 90+% of the American people support that. And if you're going to do background checks, obviously you end the gun show loophole where people can avoid the background check. Do that. You end the so-called straw man situation where you can legally go into a gun store, legally, pass the background check, and then buy a dozen guns and sell those guns to criminal elements. And right now, that's what you can do. We got to end that as well. And in my view, and this is something that I have believed for 30 years, in fact, I probably lost an election back in 1988 when I ran for Congress. And that is, I believe that assault weapons are military-style weapons designed for one thing, and that is to kill as many people as quickly as they possibly can. So I don't believe that we should continue the sale and distribution of assault weapons. Back in 1986, under that very progressive president, Ronald Reagan. It was a joke. Although I guess compared to this guy, he sounds progressive. I don't know. They licensed machine guns. Before that point, people could simply own machine guns, which are the fastest way that you can kill people. And in 1986, they started a licensing process, which means that people really can't buy machine guns unless they're used maybe for very professional reasons. And I think we got to be moving in that direction in terms of assault weapons as well. So, why don't we do what the American people want us to do? The American people want us to move toward Medicare for all. The health insurance industry says no. The American people want us to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Pharmaceutical industry says, no, you can't do that. Our profits are more important. The American people want common sense gun safety legislation, but the NRA says no. It says no. And obviously you have a Republican establishment in Washington and a president who are much more concerned about listening to the NRA than they are to the American people. So once again, you got a situation where the will of the American people is being denied by powerful corporate interests. Let me move to another subject, and that is the subject of education. Okay? Take a step back. And again, what this campaign is asking of people, think outside of the box. Take a step back. Do we have any psychologists here in the room, by the way? Okay. Would I be correct in saying that 0 through 4 are the most important years for human intellectual and emotional development? Yep. This is a brilliant psychologist, and he just confirmed what I said. He's written many books on the subject. Well, that's what everybody knows. I'm being facetious here, but that's the story. How do we treat the small children of this country? Do we treat them with the respect and the love that they are due? Well, for a start, you got all these politicians standing in front of big American flags talking about how much they love America, but apparently these guys who so-called love America do not love the children in America. And I don't know how you love America and not love our children. So, when you talk about, before you even talk about education, before a kid gets into a school, please understand that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. And then let's talk about childcare and pre-K education. All right? Anybody here have kids in childcare? You want to tell us how much it costs? All right. Anyone who wants to tell me? Yes, ma'am. Stand up, please.
I have one who goes before school only, and then I have a 3-year-old who's full-time, and it's about $10,000 a year.
$10,000 a year. And by the way, that is reasonably inexpensive. Okay, in Washington, D.C., where things are a lot more expensive than Hampshire or Vermont, a woman working for me had her daughter in a very nice child care center, $30,000 a year. Okay, that's true. Okay. So what you got, $10,000 a year. So if your family making $50,000, that's 20% of your income right off the top. And as often as not, the people who work in the child care centers are underpaid. Okay? They're underpaid and often don't have the training they need. So what other countries around the world understand that if you worry about the future of your country, you worry about the little children. And what we will do when we are in the White House together, we will fight to pass universal, high-quality, affordable childcare. And then we are going to significantly strengthen public education in America. We have a long, detailed plan on how to do that. And we're going to put triple funding for Title I schools, which are schools for lower-income kids. And also what we will do is have a standard that says that we respect and appreciate the very difficult and important work that teachers do. Okay, again, it is insane that we have teachers in this country who are working 2 or 3 jobs. We have teachers who take money out of their own pockets in order to buy the school supplies that their children need. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We will have a strong and high-quality public education system. A system which pays our teachers at least $60,000 a year. Not a radical idea. If we can pay football players and baseball players and basketball players 30, 40 million a year, I think we can come up with 60,000 a year for our teachers. All right? But it's not just childcare and it's not just public education. 4 years ago when I was here, I said, you know what? The world is changing. We're living in a competitive global economy. Technology is changing. It's not good enough. Not in the year 2019 or 2020. And 4 years ago when I said we should make public colleges and universities tuition free, it was again perceived as a radical idea. Well, I am happy to tell you that all over this country, states and communities are actively moving to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Anyone here think this is a radical idea? How much does it cost to go to college in Germany? In Scandinavia? Nothing. Okay. And by the way, 50 years ago in the United States of America, you can go to some of the great public universities. University of California, University of the City of New York, many state colleges, virtually tuition free. So if we could do that 50 years ago, right now when our GDP is so much greater, please don't tell me we cannot do it today. Now there's another issue. So we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. That's only half the issue. You got 45 million people, including probably 1 or 2 of you here, who are dealing with student debt. Anybody here dealing with student debt? More than 1 or 2, okay. So here's the story there. Young people were told that if you want to get a future, you want to make it into the middle class, you want to be a professional, you want to get a good job, you need to get a college education. So people said, okay. And they signed papers. They went deeply into debt. So we're talking about $30,000, $50,000. Go to graduate school, we're talking about a couple of $100,000. Met a young woman, graduated dental school, $400,000 in debt. Okay? So our plan is, again, thinking big, not small. All of you will remember that 11 years ago, after Wall Street nearly destroyed our economy, the stalwarts of unfettered capitalism and standing up on your own 2 feet, they went crawling to the United States Congress. And they said, bail us out, bail us out. Yes, we robbed and we cheated, but now we're going to be good boys and girls, bail us out. And Congress gave them $700 billion from the Treasury and trillions of dollars in zero interest loans from the Federal Reserve. Okay? And those are the stalwarts of rugged individualism, except when it applies to them. Okay? Well, if you could bail out Wall Street, and last year, if we, under Trump and his friends, could provide $1.1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% in large profitable corporations, anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? Yeah. See, and I talk about that all of the time, and then I wonder why the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, doesn't write particularly good articles about me. I don't know why. But I guess maybe there's a connection. Maybe we help raise the minimum wage at Amazon to $15 an hour as well. All right? Maybe that's why Washington Post is not endeared with me. I don't know. But our view is, if we could give these tax breaks to billionaires, and if we could bail out Wall Street, we can cancel all student debt in this country. And we do that not by throwing that burden of 1.6 trillion, I think it is, onto the taxpayers. We say to our friends in Wall Street, that was a joke, they're not my friends, who last year made 100 billion in profits, not too bad, that we are going to impose a very modest, by the way, tax on Wall Street speculation. And that will raise, over a 10-year period, 2.4 trillion, which is 200 billion more than we need to make public colleges and universities tuition free and cancel all student debt. All right, I've gone on longer than I should, so let me just, what I'd like to do is, you ask me questions, and I'll ask you questions. All right, but let me start me asking you. Why is it that we think so conservatively? And why is it that doing something like giving a tax breaks to billionaires, well, that's the way it goes, not a problem. Oh yeah, the fossil fuel industry is destroying the planet. So what? I mean, you know, they're business people, that's what business people do. Why is it that we accept so much, and we also accept the fact that tonight 500,000 Americans are going to be homeless? Why do we accept all that? Where is the outrage? Who wants to help me on that? Let me get some answers. I want you to think about that. I'll get to you in a second, but this is, who has some thoughts on that? Yeah, stand up.
I'm Gene Pope from Wolfeboro. Because unless it affects me or my property, I don't care, is the attitude, I'm afraid.
Okay, unless it affects me and my property, I don't care. Good, there's a lot of truth to that. Okay, where is the outrage? 3 people in America own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Now, if we talked about that taking place in another country, people say, oh my God, what an oligarchy. My God, how did they allow that to happen? Does anybody here think it is acceptable or normal or good for the economy that 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society? No. Where is the outrage? Do you see it on TV, by the way? Let's discuss it. No, not discuss it. What? Who wants to talk about this? Yeah. Come on up here. Do we have another mic? There's a mic right behind you.
Learned helplessness.
Good. All right, hold on. You're not going to get away that easy. No. What is your name?
Beverly Woods from
All right, Beverly
Wolfeboro.
said something. Learned helplessness. You're impotent. We can't do anything about it. Is that what you're saying?
That people have not been able to change things recently, so we've learned that it's no use fighting.
Okay. Good. Who wants to pick up on Beverly? She right? She wrong? I see a hand over there. Guy in the blue hat.
Beverly's right.
Hold on. There's a mic coming.
Beverly's right, but there's also.
Oh, you got to pull on that mic. Fix the thing.
Hello?
All right, help. No. Can you help him with the mic? You got it? There you go.
Beverly's right, but it's also a fact that the rich buy the corporations, or buy the newspapers, the advertising, and the politicians.
Good. In other words, basically what happens, I've been on 5 million, shows, TV shows. And the questions, and this is a true story, nobody has ever asked me, I've done God knows how many hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of newspaper interviews. Not one reporter has ever said, Bernie, what are you going to do about the outrageous level of income and wealth inequality in America? How did that happen? Not one. What are you going to do about poverty in America? 40 million people living in poverty. What's your plan to aggressively address the crisis in poverty? That question has never, ever been asked to me. And I'm asked a million things, but somehow the fundamental issues that reflect the power structure in America are not asked. And I think your point is well taken. So you have a situation in terms of media. You got a guy named Rupert Murdoch. Anybody know Rupert Murdoch? Rupert Murdoch, his name is, he owns Fox. He owns the Wall Street Journal, New York Post. All right, why don't you get up here? You're doing better than me, all right. New York Post. He owns media all over the world. Probably one of the most powerful people on earth, an extreme right-wing guy. Okay? You got other conglomerates that own major media in America. So if you don't see good stories about me in the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, you'll know why. All right? But that is, I think the point the gentleman made is a good point. And that is they limit what we can think about and what we can discuss. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's it.
Yeah. So you would think that there would be an uproar in this country about 3 people having so much wealth. You think there'd be an uproar that in the last 30 years, listen to this, top 1% have seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth. Got that? 30-year period, $21 trillion increase for the 1%. Bottom half of America, a $900 billion decrease in their wealth. Okay? Half the people in America live paycheck to paycheck. But those are issues that we're not going to talk about. You ain't going to hear them much on ABC, CBS, NBC. Not even Fox. Joke. All right. All right. All right. Now you asked me a question. Yes, sir, right here. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Here's the mic.
In the first of the most recent debates, there was a question about nuclear weapons policy, specifically about no first use.
Yep.
It looked like you were given an you wanted an opportunity to speak about that. I'm here to give you that opportunity now. Can you explain your position on no first use?
Explaining it, I don't believe that the United States of America should start a nuclear war, period. End of discussion. Let me get some hands in both places. Yeah, young woman over there. We get our mic. Why don't you come around here? There's a bit of an aisle here. I'm taking the long way around.
Thank you.
Okay, name?
Hello. My name's Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
I wanted to first thank you for being a champion on climate change policy.
Thank you.
And I know in 2015, as a senator, you called for Exxon to be investigated
Yep.
For misleading the public about
Yep.
climate change.
Yep.
So as president, how will you hold the fossil fuel companies accountable?
Okay, I'll tell you what. Well, it's more than holding them accountable. I mean, we're beyond that, to be honest with you. I mean, all that was about is evidence surfaced that the scientists and the engineers at Exxon knew. Yeah, or 20 years ago, whatever it is. I mean, these are not dumb guys. And they understood that carbon emissions were causing climate change. And Exxon hid that information and lied, and then put money into anti-climate change organizations, trying to obfuscate the issue. But we're beyond that right now. So let me ask you, and I want to ask people here, and I want you to think about it. We're working right now, on a program, and I can come up with anything, tomorrow, but I want, we want to think this one through because it is so important. If the scientists tell us that we got 12 years to prevent irreparable damage to this planet, and you got a fossil fuel industry that makes tens of billions in profits, right? You tell me, what is your idea? How do we deal with that? Who has some thoughts on it? All right, give me some ideas here. Yep, stand up, please. We got a mic right here. Hold it. Let go. Up. No one hears you. You're not talking. All right.
Hi, Bernie. Nice to see you. We could grow hemp.
Okay. Well, one of the things, obviously, but it's again, guys, there's not one little solution for this problem. I mean, this is a global crisis. All right, and we can reforest, and plant billions of trees, right? We can stop the deforestation of Brazil, which the new president is in the process of doing. But I want you to even think bigger than that. Okay? Yeah, gentleman back there. Get him a mic. Here it comes.
we can take on carbon pollution that comes from the #1 polluter in the world, the U.S. military, by shuttering hundreds and hundreds of the unnecessary bases that we have around the world, because we are an empire, and the world deserves to live in a world without an American empire.
Kind of moving into another issue, which is an important issue. But I want to stay on this issue, guys, because the future of the planet kind of depends upon us resolving it. I see a young woman over here. Yeah. Stand up. Okay, why don't you stand in right in the middle there? Yeah. Your name?
Hi, I'm Sophie. Nice to
Sophie?
meet you.
Hi.
We can ban fracking federally or ban fracking on federal land.
Absolutely. But still, God, you guys are so conservative. Come on. We're fighting for the future of the planet here. All right.
So 1, carbon tax and dividends. Of course. Research money to scientists. I worked at Kickstarter. I worked with a lot of scientists in the government, NASA, EPA. There are a lot of small people out there doing stuff, and they are not getting funding because all of the money is being locked down by corporations. And in order to stop them from locking this all down, locking our government down, we need to get out there and vote out the people that are taking this corporate money and polluting our entire system. We will not be able to change anything until we do that.
We're getting a little warmer here. All right. Well, I got bold ideas. Oh, you're going to give me wimpy ideas here. All right, Bernie the psychologist. The guy's okay. Not only is he a brilliant psychologist, he's an incredible physicist as well. Is that right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Support a Green New Deal.
Good. Okay. Well, I do. But the Green New Deal is an outline. You're right. It is. That is right, and I do. What do we do with the fossil fuel industry here? Let me lead you to. All right, we got a woman right here in blue. Yeah.
Can we change our dependence on fossil fuel, like through the car industry, and put more
Good.
research and development into
Good.
ways of
Can the
Absolutely.
government seize the fossil fuel companies like banks?
Can what?
Can the government
Seize. Well, I wouldn't use the word seize, but the.
nationalize?
Okay.
Yes, that's the word, nationalize.
But, all right, the issue of transforming our economy. We can make electric cars a lot less expensive than they are right now, right? We can make sure that anybody, yeah, my wife and I put solar up on our rooftop a couple of years ago, and it's incredible. It is, I mean, not only is it the right thing to do environmentally, we're going to save a fortune. I think we're going to pay off our investment in 7 or 8 years, and then we have free electricity. How's that? All right? We could afford to do that. There are a lot of people who cannot afford to do that. We can help make that loan to people to put up solar, and we can advance solar in very big ways. All right, this young man here. All right, here's the mic. Don't embarrass me by being smarter than me.
See, now you're getting nervous, see. You think it's so easy, huh?
I think we could get the money that the oil companies and the fossil fuel, they have influence on the entire government, so if we can get that money out of the government, then we can get a lot more done.
That's right. What's your name? Chase? Okay. Chase makes a very good point, which, you know, is so obvious. I'm glad you raised it. I should have talked about it earlier. And that is, you did show me up. And that is the power of money. I mean, you know, when we talk about the pharmaceutical industry and the insurance company and the fossil fuel industry and all of these powerful entities, they make huge campaign contributions. So you're right. At the root of, I think, a lot of the problems in this country is a system, political system, in which billionaires can buy elections, and that has got to be changed. We got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And in my In my view, we move toward public funding of elections. All right. All right, who has a question for me? Question for me. All right, way in the back there. I see a woman. Yep. Purple dress. Yes. There a mic?
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Dominique from Webster, Massachusetts. So I'm a registered nurse in Massachusetts, and I want to thank you for supporting nurses in trying to get safe staffing. Research a few years back with Johns Hopkins found that medical errors is actually the third leading cause of death in the United States.
Right.
My union had just recently supported a bill for safe staffing, which was outmoneyed by millions of dollars in Massachusetts. I won't say names, but millions of dollars, 20 million to our measly 5. And everyone looked at the nurses and said, you could use that money towards, training and better resources, but nobody's looking at the hospitals saying, what about that 20 million that you just wasted fighting the nurses at the bedside? So that's my outrage. I'm fighting because these corporations, these hospitals are taking that money and they're using it against you. They're using it against the nurses that are fighting for your lives.
Thank you very much. I see a woman in a blue. That's the blue dress? There you go.
Hi. You made a really compelling case for Medicare for all, and I'm one of the 60-year-olds who's paying $12,000 for nothing. What I hear from critics when you talk about that is, well, how do we pay for it?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Okay, everyone, what's your name, by the way, ma'am? Ma'am, your name?
Nancy.
Nancy. All right, Nancy, and I should have gotten into that. Thanks, Nancy. The answer as to how we pay for it is we are already paying for it. All right, Nancy, did I hear you correctly saying you're spending $12,000 a year for a policy which I'm hearing is not all that great? Huge deductible. Nancy, you are paying for it. All right? So what do? I'm going to eliminate your $12,000 a year. How's that? I'm going to eliminate all of your out-of-pocket expenses because you have a large deductible, right? So I don't know. It depends on what year. So maybe you're spending $15,000, $16,000 a year, whatever it may be. Okay? Gone. And I'm going to ask you to pay more in taxes depending on your income. But it will be a hell of a lot less than the $15,000 or $16,000 you're paying right now. All right? So here's the story. Mark my words. All right? In fact, I don't even want to take your money because this is just a bet that I will win. So I'm not going to make the bet. You see ads here in New Hampshire. Bernie Sanders is going to raise your taxes, Nancy. Oh man, how terrible it is. Struggling middle class Bernie is going to raise Nancy's taxes. What they will forget to mention in their 30-second ad is that Nancy is not going to be paying $12,000, $15,000 a year out of pocket and in premiums and in deductibles and everything else. Okay? No co-payments. So that's what the lie will be. So what we have got to do is do what other countries do, is you publicly fund out of our tax base. That's how we fund the military, and that's how we fund everything else. And virtually every other major country on earth does that with healthcare. So Nancy, good news is you ain't gonna be paying $12,000 or $15,000 in premiums and in co-payments and out-of-pocket expenses. You will be paying something in taxes depending upon your income. You will be far better off under my plan than the current plan. Okay? That's how we're going to pay for it. Okay, I see, okay, we got a young, all right here. Here's the mic. This guy's going to lose some weight here. Okay. Hold up.
Senator, nice to see you again after the last go-around. Kathy.
But this time we're going to win it. All right.
Coordinator for the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and
Wonderful.
Medicare.
Wonderful.
And I'd like to ask you what you have for a plan. We get our COLAs now, and they don't amount to anything. They offset Medicare, not other expenses.
Right.
What will you do or think about doing to come
What
up
we
with
will
a
do.
plan to keeping it an earned benefit, not an entitlement.
Right.
But fixing the system that's all messed up with a $17,529 average Social Security check. All those people, 50% of them under that, by the time those of us that pay our medical, I pay $360 a month. There's not enough money left, and it ties back to lack of livable wages, not even talking minimum wage,
Right.
and the high cost of housing.
Absolutely.
So what do you have for a plan to help the seniors and those who are coming up?
Okay, your first name again is?
Kath.
Kath? Okay. First of all, thank you for what you're doing. This is an issue, one of those issues we don't talk about enough. There are millions of seniors, and Kathy, you may have the data better than I do, who are living, I think it's 20% of seniors living under $13,500 a year. Does that sound about right?
Yes, thanks.
All right, which I don't understand how anybody can live on that income. So this is what we're going to do. What we're going to do is a couple of things. Number one, we are going to expand benefits for people on Social Security, primarily the lower income people, okay? And how do we do that? We do that by scrapping the cap. You're familiar with what that means. So, right. All right. So right now, if you make $1 million a year, you pay exactly the same into the Social Security Trust Fund as somebody makes, what, $132,900 right now today. Okay. So that's it. You lift that cap, starting, by the way, not at $132,000, but at $250,000. You got that? Hold there. You start at $250,000, which is the top 1%. You lift that cap, and you have those people paying the same percentage of their income in Social Security taxes as somebody making $50,000. You do that, you accomplish two goals. Number one, you extend the lifetime of Social Security another 50 years. All right, that's important. Number two, you raise benefits primarily, but for everybody, but primarily for lower income seniors. Now, the second thing we do, which is very significant, you all know our COLA is the cost of living adjustment. And for many years, it has been 0, 0, 1%, 2%. And the reason that those cost of living adjustments have been so measly is seniors' inflation. The COLAs are dependent on inflation. Theoretically, if your expenses go up by 10%, your Social Security check goes up by 10%. But how do we determine what inflationary costs are for seniors? Well, we combine them with everybody else. So if you're a 19-year-old buying a computer and the price of that computer has gone down, that's part of the process by which we determine a COLA for seniors. Now, you help me out here, Kat, where do seniors spend their money primarily? Often healthcare, right?
Healthcare, food, and housing.
Right. So healthcare has gone up very significantly. Prescription drugs have gone up very significantly. Housing has often gone up. Property taxes have gone up. So what we're going to do is have a segregated index, Kat, a segregated index for seniors, really tracing how much more seniors are spending this year than last year. And that will result in a much higher or a higher COLA than is currently the case. All right, maybe one last question. The lady in the blue dress, way in the window. Was there a song about that? The lady in the...
Thank you. My name is Mia. One of the consistencies throughout all of these issues is unchecked corporate power.
Yes.
One of the great ways to address this is by building worker power. We'd love to know what you're going to do to make it possible for us to join millions of workers in collective bargaining and unions around the country.
Thank you very much. And I didn't plant her over there. Did I plant you? Kat is your name? Mia, I'm sorry. Mia's exactly right. And, you know, this gets back to what I said at the beginning. The only way we make change is when millions of people stand together. And the only way we grow the middle class in this country is when we grow the trade union movement. So you are looking at somebody who perhaps is the most pro-union member of the United States Congress. So it's not just that I think I have a 100% lifetime voting record with the AFL-CIO. You know, more than that, I've been out on picket lines and we've helped workers organize and all that stuff. So this is what we're going to do. We have a piece of legislation that we will implement. It's called the Workplace Democracy Act. this is what it does. Right now, the truth is, there are millions of workers who would like to join unions, but they have to take on their companies, and workers get fired for trying to organize, and even if they successfully create a union, the companies will refuse to negotiate a first contract and so forth and so on. So what we do is we have a card check off policy. That means if 50% of the workers in a unit, plus one, sign a card, saying they want a union, they have a union. And then if the company refuses to negotiate a first contract, there will be very severe penalties against that company. And the other thing that we do is we repeal the section of the Taft-Hartley bill which allows for so-called right-to-work legislation. When I talk about creating a mass movement in this country, we expect the unions to be in the middle of it. All right, I got to get running because we have another meeting in an hour or two. But thank you all for coming out. And let me just conclude by saying this, and Mia's question is a good way to maybe end on. It goes without saying, I'm here to ask for your help to win here in New Hampshire. It's a very, very important state. I'm asking for your help to win the Democratic nomination nationally. I'm asking for your help to defeat Donald Trump. That's obvious. All right? But I'm asking, getting back to Mia's point, I'm asking something else of you, which no other candidate is. I can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. We can't transform this country unless there is a strong trade union movement. Unless there are millions of people from all walks of life, working class people, lower income people, people who believe in justice regardless of what their income is. Unless they are prepared to stand up and take on that corporate power, which now dominates what goes on legislatively and what goes on politically. Unless we are prepared to do that, we are not going to do what has to be done. And at the end of the day, what I believe is the only way you beat Donald Trump is by having an agenda that speaks to the needs of working people. Because so many of those workers have become demoralized. So we've got a lot of work to do. And again, I don't have to tell anybody here how important New Hampshire is. You play a very, very oversized role in the American. It's true. I'm humble, I admit it. Okay, you do. And we think right now we're in really good shape in Iowa. Got a good shot to win there. We think with your help we can win here. We're doing well in South Carolina. We're doing well in Nevada, and we're doing well in California. But this state, and if you win those states, I think you're on the path to victory. And by the way, let me conclude by saying, so you'll feel okay. Every single national poll that has been done in the last year, including one just a couple of days ago, has me beating Donald Trump and beating him sometimes by pretty big percentages. Last poll just came out the other day, has us, which is what most of the polls, some more, some less, has us beating them by 8 points. So, we need your help to win here. This is a crucial state. We're proud that we have well over 1 million volunteers nationally. We need your help to help us knocking on doors. Got a great staff here. So thank you all for coming out. Let's go forward together. Let's beat Donald Trump. Let's transform this country. Thank you.
There you are.